Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Legends of Sport podcast. I'm your host, as always, Andy Bernstein. This week's guest continues a series we started a couple of seasons ago called Legends of Photography. We've had some amazing and iconic photographers as part of that series, and today's guest is certainly as legendary and iconic as they come. His name is Michael Zagaris. Based in the Bay Area, Michael, or Z-Man, as he is affectionately known, is still going strong for over 60 years and at the young age of 77. Z has documented the San Francisco 49ers and Oakland A's over many eras, as well as the rock and roll scene throughout the 60s and beyond. Z's most recent book is titled Field of Play, 60 Years of NFL Photography. It is truly a special and intimate behind-the-scenes look at every aspect of what happens in and around the NFL. It is a raw and sometimes disturbing look at what the athletes endure to play the game they love and the game we love to watch. No one has done it better than Z-Man. He's been an inspiration to me throughout my career, and I know he's been one to all of my colleagues and young photographers just starting out. So many of us turned out to his recent book signing in Los Angeles, which is a true testament to his greatness. Z and I talk about having to earn the trust of some key figures in our careers. In my case, Pat Riley, Shaq, Kobe, and in his, Bill Walsh and Joe Montana, and many, many others. We talk about how vital that trust continues to be for him to produce the quality of photography he is famous for. Such a pleasure to connect with the unique and iconic Michael Zagaris on this episode. I know you will all enjoy it and probably learn a thing or two. I know I did. So here we go with my interview with Z-Man, and as always, I'll see you on the backside. Well, I want to welcome one of the icons, the true icons of sports photography, music photography, photography in general, a tremendous photojournalist, a friend, Michael Zagaris. I can't thank you enough for coming on, man. I know you're busy. You're a busy guy, but, can't thank you enough for coming on and talking to us here at the Legends of Sport podcast.
Hey, you know what? It's an honor to be on. I mean, this is dynamite.
Thank you, man.
This is why we do it.
Yeah, exactly. So we got a lot of stuff to cover, man, and I do appreciate in advance you giving me some time here. Of course, I want to get into your new book. Of course, I went to the book signing, the opening in LA a few weeks ago, which was amazing. But Michael, your longevity and your passion for your work, 50 plus years at least, right?
Yeah.
It's incredibly mind blowing, and it's an inspirational to me. I've been doing this 40 plus years. All of our colleagues are still, I think the word is astounded. I mean, really, by the fact that you still get it going every single time you go out to work. And, you're not a spring chicken anymore, my friend. So where does all this energy and all this juice come from?
I think listen, I think for both of us, there's genetics come into play.
Yeah.
I love what I do.
Yeah.
So it in many respects, it doesn't seem like work. And that's the biggest thing of all. Mm-hmm. The other thing is what we do, with a few exceptions, there's not a lot of money in it. Mm-hmm. So unless you're Peter Beard or, you've got a family with a lot of money, you need to make money. Yeah. I still, at 77 years old, I still pay rent. So, the wolf's always at the door.
You mean rent doesn't end at a certain age? Like they just let you go, I just keep living there. We don't need rent.
Well, I feel like I'm running, and if I stumble, the wolves are upon me. I can't throw it out of bounds.
Yeah. Mike, and I'm going to call you Michael because I know everybody calls you Z-Man, and I know you love that. But, Kobe had a great line after, everyone asked him, well, why now? Why are you retiring now? And sure. It was very simple. He said, I woke up yesterday and I realized I didn't want to go to the gym to shoot anymore. First time in my life, I didn't want to go and shoot. Right.
Yeah, sure.
What about you? Do you ever see that happening in your life?
Sure. I mean, you know what? When it really ceases to be fun, because in the end, at least for me, this
Yeah.
has always been fun. It's something I look forward to doing.
Mhm.
Um, the other thing is your body, I think, at a certain point, especially shooting football,
Yes.
will tell you, hey, you know what? You're done. I'm not quite there yet, but I'm more there than I certainly was 10 years ago. Last year in Green Bay, we had the divisional playoff at
Mhm.
the end of January. It was 10 below zero.
Yeah.
And I was I was not warm, but I wasn't cold
Mhm.
until midway through the third quarter because that cold just gets into you. That
Yeah.
shot I got of the block punt, I tell people I never would have gotten the end shot I got had it been a regular game
Mhm.
because by that time it was so cold and I could feel it.
Mm.
Ordinarily, I'd be lying on my stomach
Yeah.
with the wide angle lens in case there's a block punt. It was so cold, I thought if I get down like this, it might take me
Yeah.
2 minutes to get up again. So
Right.
I was on a knee.
I
It
love
was
it.
cold.
Yeah.
And the next day, I felt the way I used to feel in college the day after a game, where it
Uh,
was sometimes, depending on who you played, it was hard to get out of bed.
yeah. I mean, that's something that just can't be overlooked, man. You are working in the elements. I mean, I go into an arena, it's climate controlled, doesn't matter what the weather's like outside. Could be in Minnesota in January, and it's -20, but it's 65, 68 degrees in the arena.
Yeah.
I almost feel guilty like about looking at what you do and watching you. Like I went to the NFC Championship game. I saw you do your thing. I've been on the field with you. It just blows my mind that you have I guess, the physical ability to keep doing what you do at this high level. Just amazing.
I,
So,
I think a lot of it too is I'm around the players
mhm,
all the time.
yeah.
And in my headspace, I'm not just taking pictures, I'm playing the game. And because of that,
Hmm.
you, you have to stay in pretty good shape. I mean, I'm not in gladiator shape like they are, but I'm in good shape. And I think being around them,
Hmm.
both physically and mentally, it's really helped.
Yeah. So you didn't start out wanting to be a photographer, right? No, I mean, talking to
Yeah.
you, knowing you a little bit, but also reading, a lot about you. Um, Talk about those early years. Talk about what you felt that your path was, back in the 60s.
Back in the 60s, and I always predicate it with back in the 60s. When
Mhm.
I tell the story now, people laugh.
Yeah.
I wanted to be a professional football player initially,
Mhm.
play 5, 6, 7 years, have a beautiful wife, then get into politics. And I was going to run for first Congress,
Mhm.
then the Senate, then be president. One of the reasons I was a Sino-Soviet major, I thought, you know what? I want to be able to negotiate my own treaties with the Russians and the Chinese. You tell that story now, people literally laugh like, oh, bro,
Yeah.
that's hilarious. But seriously. And it was
Yeah.
like, no, that we're talking about the 60s. It was a different time, a different era, a much more innocent America for
Right, but
sure.
you were in the middle of it. I mean, you were at George Washington University. You were playing football.
Right.
I mean, what got you into politics, let's say? What got you into wanting to pursue that career?
I think in when I was in high school, when I was a freshman in high school, JFK had run for the presidency. And I had a cursory interest in politics the way I think probably a lot of people my age did at that point in time.
Mhm.
Very innocent. Um, I JFK was cool. He was a good guy, especially when you put him next to Nixon.
Yeah.
I mean, I knowing nothing that I know now,
Yeah.
it seemed like a really cool thing. And he was into sports. I remember he was a Red Sox fan
Hmm.
and he loved football.
Hmm.
And it was just all of the things, again, in a very innocent America of that point in time. I wanted to give back. I wanted to do something for my country.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
I mean, even as I'm saying that now, that sounds so like, what? Are you kidding me? Because we're much more cynical. But I really wanted to do something to help my state, help my country, help the world.
Yeah.
Knowing nothing about the world, I wanted to help.
Sure. And how did you avoid the war, by the way? How did that happen?
I was after the debacle of law school, where after the assassination, the next day I had to fly back to San Francisco, drive to Santa Clara. I had a contracts final. And I when I got off the plane, that's when I found out that Bobby had actually died. And I was, I want to say I was crushed. I was numb. And I remember I walked into the room where the tests were, sat down, they passed out the mimeograph sheet. I had like 7 or 8 blue books. And I sat there for, a number of minutes, just kind of like, huh. And then I remembered I took my wallet out and I had 3 or 4 of those little squares that used to come in the Topps baseball cards, headshots. And I remember I had a Clemente, a Marichal, and I think a Mays. So I took the one Marichal, I put it on the first blue book, took a quarter out, transferred the picture onto the blue book, drew a little balloon, the mouth, and wrote, "Mike, this is all bullshit." And I proceeded to fill 7 or 8 blue books with how America was fucked and murdered its leaders. That was the end of law school. My parents, I remember my dad said, "Okay, big shot, now what are you going to do?" I said, I don't know, but I'll know when I see it. And literally 2 weeks later, I get your reclassified 1A report for your physical. And I remembered I was against the war in Vietnam. I thought, I'm not going. I remember going to the induction center at Oakland. It was pandemonium. There were guys in drag. There were people on acid. I mean, it was like a wild scene. The guy behind me was from Woodland. He had come in the night before in a bus, said, "Oh, the Army paid for my room last night. I got a tattoo. I can hardly wait to go in." I thought, I'm not going in. And I was truculent all through the physical. Ended up, and I had like a thick thing of all my football injuries. They didn't care about that at all. Ended up 1Y because as a kid, I'd had bronchial pneumonia. 1Y meant you could only be drafted in case of a national emergency. So at that point, I probably wasn't going to have to go to the war in Vietnam. But then I walked out and it's like all the things what are you going to do with your life? Well, I don't know. I've got to deal with this. Now it was like, what am I going to do? So, you know what? I thought, I had read Huxley's Doors of Perception. I had read John Hersey's novel about an acid trip. I knew the year before when I had heard Revolver, the Beatles had dropped. I dropped acid, not to escape, not to get fucked up. I was, at that point in time in my life, I was searching for self, for truth. That first acid trip, it was like the veil had been pulled back. It was like amazing. And I started hanging out at the Fillmore because I'd always been into music from the time I was about 8 or 9 years old. I mean, Ray Charles, Elvis, James Brown, they were my, my go-to guys. I was introduced above and beyond the Beatles, all the English bands that were coming through. I could see they were setting the tone, and they were basically playing our blues roots, much of what we had never heard, and using their style and their theatricality to both change our whole culture and in turn be changed by it. So I started writing a book about that. And I'd show up at the Fillmore, I'd have a tape recorder, I'd have a camera, the way you'd have a camera on a trip. I never thought about being a photographer. And I'd have 2 or 3 joints in my pocket, hang out backstage, interviewing all the musicians. It was, you could do it then because there wasn't the security, there wasn't the corporatization. And all these guys, we were the same age, literally.
So you would just show up and they'd think, oh, you're just a media guy, or like.
I'd say I'm, just like when I started taking pictures when I was in high school at football games when I'd make my own credentials.
Yeah, sure. We all
Used to
did
come out
that.
with a line of bullshit, and it was like, you know, yeah, hey, come on in. You
I
know, like,
love it.
hey, I'm doing this book.
Yeah.
Here. And we'd all share stories, and there'd be like these hour-and-a-half rambling interviews, and I'd always take pictures. A year and a half went by,
Yeah.
and now I've interviewed enough, musicians. I'm getting ready to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I had interviewed Eric Clapton when Cream was breaking up.
Mm-hmm.
Eric now comes back. He was with Delaney and Bonnie. He was staying at the Sausalito Inn because he loved it there because there were no telephones in the rooms, no TVs. So you could be alone. So I just showed up unannounced, knocked on the door. Eric comes, hey, man, what's going on? And I come in. I've got a transcript of our last interview. I had a chunk of hash in my pocket. We start talking. We smoked a little hash, then started having the esoteric conversations you have when you're high.
Yeah.
At some point, he starts reading the transcript of the interview. I had brought a stack of proof sheets and a loop
Mm-hmm.
to busy myself while he was doing that. So he's reading the transcripts. I'm going through my proof sheets. And at one point he goes, hey, man, what you got there? And I said, just proof sheets I'm going through. And he says, do you mind if I have a look? I said, yeah, sure. So I handed him a proof sheet and a loop, and he takes one of the proof sheets and he's holds the loop up above it like this, and he's going, oh, yes, quite good. And I says, Eric, if you actually put the loop on the proof sheet and your eye on the loop, you can see it.
Yeah.
So now he starts looking, and he's going, oh, fucking hell. Man, these are great. Can we use these? And I said, for what? He says, look, man, albums, songbooks. He says, look, man, we'll pay you. And I said, cool. Yeah, okay.
Wow.
And he says, the writing's all right, but you should be doing this for a gig. And I mean, as soon as he said it, it was like, fuck yeah.
Wow.
Oh,
wow.
all right. And a month later, Peter Frampton comes back to town. He was with Humble Pie at the time, and I'd known Peter for a year or so.
Yeah.
At one point, I'm having the conversation about what happened with Eric and I. And Peter goes, well, then you've got to come to London. And at that point in time, I'm teaching in the hood in East Palo Alto. I'm married. I don't have any money. I said, London, I don't have any money. He says, look, man, he says, Mary and I've got a place in St. John's Wood. He says, I'm on the road a lot. You can stay with us. So I go to London. This is summer of 71.
Yeah.
He's on the road. Mary is a model at the time. My then wife would often sleep late. Mm-hmm. Mary would take me around. We'd go to antique places. We'd hang with her friends. Her best friends, Twiggy and Patty Boyd, who's married to George Harrison. So I'm meeting people I'd never meet ordinarily.
Yeah.
And I was literally in the right place at the right time. Mm-hmm. I came back here and I started getting gigs immediately because I'd hung out in London, and I've got long hair, patched Levi's. It's right place, right time again.
Yeah.
And that's how it started.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yes, right time, right place, the whole thing. But what about you? If you could sit back from your own self and your own, look at your personality, from outside yourself, what about you gave you the confidence, first of all, to do that, and the balls to do it, and, like this is that secret sauce. There's that moxie. I call it Brooklyn moxie, where I come from. What was it that inside of you that gave you that confidence?
Yeah, I mean, I could sit here and go on and on. Honest to God, Andy, I don't know. It's when you're young, you just do it.
Right.
And you've got that chutzpah because you don't know any better. And you just think, I want to do this, so I'll do it. Again, I had great parents. I was born literally 1945, right before the war ended. I was the first Greek baby in the neighborhood. So I had all this attention. I think all of those things combined, that all was part of it. But it's nothing that was conscious with me. I just always thought, I want to do this, so I'm going to do it.
Right. But you and I know that it takes a special breed of a photographer to gain the loyalty, respect, and of course the access that you and I have benefited from in our careers, right? It just doesn't happen by accident. You have one shot at it. I tell young photographers this all the time. You don't get a second chance. My dad used to say, you have one chance at the only impression you're ever going to get, not the first impression, the only impression. Sure. So when you started approaching the Niners or the Oakland A's, who you were working with, to just be part of the furniture, be in the locker room, on the bus, the plane, whatever it was. I mean, it was different back then. Yes, of course, as it was for me at the beginning, but there was less layers to go through. But sure. Was it just a natural thing for you that you just like walk with the team after the game into the locker room, or just be in there pregame and no one questioned that, or what?
Well, you know what? When I started actually shooting sports, again, never thought I was going to do this for a living. I wanted to, I used to run out after the games on the field to get chin straps and autographs. And this is in grammar school. This is early in high school.
Yeah.
I remember walking after one of the games, I'm walking back and I see a pass on the ground. I didn't even know what it was. I picked it up.
Yeah.
Took it home with my programs. I'm looking at it. The next week I noticed the people on the field wearing the passes are photographers. I thought, I want to play the game. I want to be as close to the players as I can. I didn't even think about it. Gee, now I can be a photographer. But I thought, if I have a camera and a pass, now I'm on the field.
Right.
I can't get any closer than that unless I'm in the game.
Yeah.
And I saw every week the passes change colors. So I went to an art store. I got like 15 different colors, art paper. I cut them all in the shape of the pass. I traced the old prospector, which was on each pass, on the logo. And then at Kezar, the players would dress at Kezar Pavilion right next to the stadium. The photographers would come down the stairs and go through the tunnel with the players. And I'd see, okay, this week it's a green pass. I'd go in, I'd have my green pass with a little circle. And I had tickets to the game. So my brother and I'd go into the stadium, and then at Kezar back then, there wasn't a fence around the stadium. There was a low 3-foot metal fence.
Yeah.
You climb over that, you step over it, there's a track, and then the field. The only security in those days is the San Francisco Police Department.
Yeah.
Park Station was literally next to the stadium. So about every 10 or 15 yards, SFPD. So I've got my dad's London fog coat. I've got a hat with a little card that said press. I mean, if you ever saw something like that, now this guy, grab him, get him out of here. So I had that, and then I had my credential, and I had my dad's Ansco camera. Stepped over the thing, started to walk. I see one of the cops. He's walking right toward me.
Yeah.
We get like within 5 feet of each other. Under his badge, it's got a little nameplate that says Pope. So I put my hand out. I go, Officer Pope, Michael Zagaris. I'm working on a book called Sunday Gladiators for the NFL. No book would be complete without pictures of the officers guarding the field, sort of the denizens of the field. Could you get a few of your officers? I'd like to get a shot of you for the book, maybe with the press box in the back. He goes, yeah. I took about 5 or 6 pictures. They never fucked with me again.
Oh my God, Mike, that is just classic. I love it. I love it. I love it. The first Super Bowl I ever shot was at the Rose Bowl. I forgot what year it was. It was the Washington Miami Rose Bowl, the famous John Riggins play. Remember?
Sure.
What year was that? I don't know, 83 or whatever.
82.
Right. And I lived in I'm just telling you this story because it's just so indicative of what we did back then, to get in. I bought a ticket for $35. I rode my bike over there and I played the part just like you. I had the 2 cameras and I don't think I had a fake credential. I had something around my neck that looked like the back of a credential or something. And the Rose Bowl, you start off at the top and the aisles go all the way down, like continuous onto the field. And it was probably 5 hours before game time. And there's Peter Reed Miller and Maxon and all the guys that I was working for as an assistant. And Peter looks up, he looks at me, gives me a look. I just keep walking past the cop and, and I sidle over to Peter. He goes, well, that took a lot of guts. stay next to me. And as soon as I see the monitor come down, just keep moving around the field. That's before the quadrants and you had to have the vest and all that stuff.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And
yeah,
and it worked. And the bottom line to the whole story, you'll love this. The bottom line is I got a great picture of Riggins, shedding the guy and the whole sequence coming right at me. I had the balls to send it to the NFL, who published it in their, whatever that
Pro magazine.
magazine.
Yeah.
They published it. They published like 3 photos with my name and the whole thing. So I saw Dave Boss years later, who was, the head of it, the publisher. I told him this story. He goes, I'm glad you're telling me that now, because we probably would have had you arrested if we had known that back then,
Yeah.
But that's what we did, Neil Leifer tells the great story, which I'm sure about, how he would gain access to Yankee Stadium to shoot football games by wheeling in the veterans in the wheelchairs, like because they got access on the field, so Neil would go with him. And by the way, he had his camera with him, that kind of thing.
Well, I remember because years later, I said, Neil goes, Michael, there must be one picture I have that you'd like. Maybe we can trade. And I said, oh yeah, no, I know exactly the picture. The picture of Alan Amici scoring the touchdown at sudden death. And he goes, well, I sell that as fine art for $5,000. I said, I do the same thing, Neil. Except you weren't even a fucking photographer then. I said, I know the story. And I said, that may be the best picture you ever shot.
Oh yeah.
I want that.
Did he give it up? He probably didn't, did he? Oh, that's hilarious. So see, who were you, like, I remember who I was trying to, kind of get my work to look like. I emulated. I loved seeing all the great Sports Illustrated photographers, and I looked through the magazine, of course, every week. And I wanted to be I wanted to be Walter Yoser. I wanted to be Neil Leifer. I wanted to be a combination of all those guys. Who influenced you both in music and in sports?
Well, in sports, in football, Robert Rieger. I remember getting the pros for Christmas, I think my freshman or sophomore year in high school. And that was kind of like the Bible. Another sports photographer I loved was, I'm trying to think of his name, and it escapes me right now, Herb Whiteman, who was actually a professor of photography at Washington University in St. Louis. And he did a lot of behind the scenes stuff before anyone else did. And then there were Barry Feinstein was somebody that I really looked up to. And then Robert Capra, Deborah Turbeville, Sarah Moon. I mean, a lot of the fashion photographers. And and photojournalists, I brought that with me into sports because for me, most of what I had seen, whether it was Sports Illustrated or even in the books, Rieger, it was football action, which I loved, but there was very little behind the scenes, and really changed the whole thing for me when I actually started for real was Bill Walsh getting the job with the 49ers. And I knew that Bill, from people that knew him at Stanford, he was an academic, he was a student of history. And so a couple of weeks into him getting the job with San Francisco, I went in and we sat down in his office and I pitched him with the idea. And I said, Coach, I think you coming here, you've got a chance to do something really special. And I think that it's going to be different than any coach we've had to date. I'd like to cover this and document it, not as a sports photographer shooting a game. I want to shoot this as history. And I said, a history for both you, for the team, and for the NFL. And I want to cover it as a photojournalist, not just as a sports photographer, but what that'll mean. And he goes, well, what does that mean? And I said, well, I'd like to have total access, meaning I want to be able to shoot practice. I want to be able to shoot the games, both home and away. I want to be with the team in the hotel, in the locker room pregame, at halftime, postgame. I want to get everything as a document, as it really is.
Right.
And he goes, I understand, I see. But he says, well, what happens if you go too far? I said, Coach, inevitably, I probably will go too far. I said, all you have to do is give me a look and I'll back off a little. Yeah. And believe me, if you ever got the look from Bill, and I got it a couple times, it was heavier than Mike Ditka coming out into the field and grabbing your face mask and screaming at you. I didn't know Ditka well, but I knew him well enough. Yeah. That was a lot of the coaches that I played under were like that. They would do that, but then afterwards they might come up to you in the locker room and go, hey, you're my fucking guy.
Yeah. Incredible.
When Bill gave you the look.
Yeah.
It'd be that side-eye glance.
Oh, sure.
And then he wouldn't talk to you for a week and you'd be like, oh,
God. Well, we're so parallel because I had that same relationship with Phil Jackson. Phil got it. Phil understood. He actually was a huge supporter of photography and photojournalism. In fact, Red Holtzman had given him a camera when he was injured one year and just took pictures from the bench and on the bus and all that. So he was there when Willis Reed got the shot in his thigh, when he came in the locker room. No one's ever seen that picture, but I take Phil's word for it. And he and George Kalinsky ended up doing a book together from that championship. So when it was my turn, as his team photographer, we had that same conversation and he got it. But I knew that side eye, man. I knew it when I was in the locker room. If I was there, a tenth of a second too long, I got it. I knew exactly when to go. That's like a sixth sense that we have to have. So yeah. But see, let's talk about this thing. First of all, I'm getting a hernia from this book because it's like it's like a freaking cinder block, this thing. No, I love this book. I got to tell you I could spend, an hour on each spread and reading it and really understanding like your mindset. But, getting people like Joe Montana and Fred Bolitnikoff, Ronnie Lott to write about it. And of course, you got Dr. Harry Edwards, world-renowned civil rights activist and sociologist. So I know what went into putting this book together. I can just imagine. What are you hoping that this book conveys to people who maybe just don't get it? Like they're big football fans, but they, what are you trying to get across?
Well, this book was dual in nature. I wanted it to be a player's view of what it's like to play in a game. And that's what I was trying to document from day one. It was also my journey intermingled with all of this.
Right.
I wanted people to feel really what it's like to be in the game, to be a player. It's not just scoring touchdowns or blocks. It's the drama before a game, and everybody approaches it. 55 guys in uniform. There are, 30 different at it. Some guys will be throwing up. Some guys will be like jittery and nervous and talking. Other guys will be very contemplative. I wanted to encapsulate that. Pain is another thing. I've got pictures of people being shot up, and I knew initially it was going to be controversial in the sense that you don't see that. I wanted to show that, not to be exploitive or to be sensational. It's because what these guys go through, and it's what you do as a player. I know I hated needles. I was afraid of needles. I got shot up when I was hurt because in college, when you're in scholarship, they don't present it as, you're injured right now. Would you mind if it's like, hey, we're going to do this?
Yeah.
And the biggest thing that drives you, the guy behind you, who's often your best friend, if you miss this game or the next two games, and he comes in and catches 7 or 8 balls, you may not play again.
Yeah.
And so these are all the things you do. And I wanted to bring that out. I wanted to show the sacrifices the players make to stay on the field, to help their teammates, to help themselves. I wanted to show all aspects of the game. I wanted to show the coaches making halftime adjustments. I wanted you to feel, when you've looked through this book, that you're playing, that it's like, oh my God, This is what it's like.
Yeah.
And I think that combined with some of the stories, Steve Cassidy writes a lot of the text.
Mm-hmm.
Steve, at that point in time, we had done a number of stories for Pro Magazine for both Dave and John Webush.
Mm-hmm.
Steve was Madden's ghostwriter, did his radio stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and he was a student of the game. And his writing style is very evocative of Hunter Thompson. So you get the feel of that era,
yeah,
how it was.
Yeah.
And I think that the combination of all of that together, it's, if you're a fan, I mean, a real fan, it gives you a deeper appreciation and I think love of the game.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you have not only pulled the curtain back, you have pulled like multiple curtains back, because you are in places that, you know, TV has never been allowed in. You've documented everything. I mean, even your in-game portraits that you've shot, showing, you know, the mud and the grit and the exhaustion and all that stuff. It's just, you know, you were such an influence on me personally. And I know, you know, a couple of generations of photographers who've looked at your work and really, like, we just look at it in fascination. Like, wow, he was like the photo you have. I tell you, the one photo you shot that was so influential to me as a young photographer. Who was the guy you had that you took the tile out of the ceiling, and the guy is standing through the ceiling tile getting worked on? I mean, who does
that was Old Mile High Stadium, and that's Bubba Paris.
But what an incredible moment that was, right?
Yeah.
And then, you know, fast forward for me, you know, being with Kobe, you know, in literally in men's rooms, and where he did his meditation and his, you know, I never would have had the guts to do that if I hadn't seen that you had done that in your career and gained that trust in some way or another. So you did mention that Bill Walsh says, what happens if you go too far? So is there a moment or two that you can share with us where you did go too far?
I remember halftime Super Bowl 19, which was at Stanford. And at halftime in the Super Bowl, I mean, now halftime's like, I think 7 minutes. So you've got about 5 minutes where you're in there to make all your adjustments. Halftime of the Super Bowl, you've got 30 minutes. It's forever. And Bill had the whole offense. First, it was the whole team, then the whole offense. And I'm going around and taking, you know, looking for and taking different pictures. And I see him at the blackboard doing what he usually, his adjustments. And I'm shooting with a wide angle lens, wide from behind. And I'm thinking, this looks okay. And now I'm moving along the wall. Now I'm moving along the side wall. And now I'm kind of parallel to Coach, and I've got him wide with the team. And I'm thinking, God, you know, the really good shot would be if I'm low and shooting up and seeing him. So I lay down on my side right at the edge of the blackboard, and I'm like this.
Yeah.
And Coach is making his things, and he's talking, and he's backing up.
Oh, no.
Almost like falls over me. And I remember I had to put my hand up and kind of so he wouldn't fall. And he turned around and he goes, Mike, what are you doing? It's the fucking Super Bowl. And I immediately just got up and just went to the back of the room. It was like,
oh my God. But you're dealing with so many different personalities. I mean, just give me a difference between, let's say, Joe Montana and Steve Young. I mean, two completely different dudes, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, totally. I mean, and you know what? Steve was then and is now one of the nicest guys in the world.
Yeah, I worked with him in the USFL when he first started.
Yeah. And that Steve is still Steve today. Almost, you know, like spaced out and just like Joe was the guy I hung with, and Joe was cool. I mean, he is a prankster. They were as different as night and day. And I tell people now, there was always tension. And it was the tension of knowing somebody is right behind you and really good and wants your job.
Right.
And Joe had come from a situation where he got fucked over by his high school coach. He got fucked over by Dan Devine at Notre Dame. And once Steve came in, as nice a guy as Steve was lobbying for that job, and Joe knew it.
Yeah.
So there was there was palpable tension between them. And it was hard because it's like you're in high school.
Mm-hmm.
You want to be everybody's friend, but sometimes your best friend, if you're talking with this guy, it's like, hey, Andy, if you're his friend, fuck you. You're not mine. You're like, bro.
No, look, you're preaching to the choir. I mean, I had an experience with Shaq and Kobe where I was friends with both of them. I had done a lot of stuff with each of them off the court with their families and what have you. When that relationship really devolved, let's say, it really became two camps in that locker room. You know, were you Shaq's guy or you Kobe's guy? And I had to walk that tightrope. It was really difficult, honestly. And then when Shaq left, it took a little time to sort of for him to sort of like allow me sort of back into, I don't want to say his good graces, but just the trust factor and all that. And we're navigating like big children. I mean,
and now it's that plus it's the league, and you know this better than I do.
Yeah.
And the league with the team and the different, the PR people change.
Yeah.
And
well, that's what I want to ask you. I mean, how is your job changed? I mean, mine has changed, over 180 degrees, right? In terms of access, doesn't exist anymore. It doesn't matter. 36, 7 years, access is gone. Unless I'm working for the league at a finals or what have you. I mean, are you still sort of granted the same carte blanche access and people respect that as the regimes change and the PR people and the layers keep getting, deeper and deeper?
I still have it. I'm surprised. And it's always in the last 10, 12 years, it's changed with the coaches. When Singletary came in, I had it for a while, and then he dropped his pants, and that was a big story in the paper. After that, couldn't shoot in the locker room.
Oh,
and he didn't want anybody shooting around, getting too close to him. That was his personality.
Sure.
When Harbaugh came in, all of a sudden he loved all the pictures, but there was no access. And he was always a strange bird. Good coach. I had heard stories that he was, right on the cusp of autism. Who knows?
Yeah.
But he did things his own way, and it took me almost until the end of his tenure to get access. And our PR guy at the time was Bob Lang. Bob had come from Philadelphia. He was wound really tight. He dealt with Andy Reid. He was always like nervous. You can't do this. You can't do that. And I finally went to him and I said, listen, I don't want to go behind your back, but I'd like to talk to the coach myself. And I said, and the reason being, I know you can't advocate for me the way I can advocate for me. And I'd like to lay it out my way. And he goes, okay. Your funeral. I said, you know what? It may be my funeral, but at least I'll be the architect of it. So I sat down with him maybe for 25, 30 minutes, and it went well at first. But then he started, you can't do this is a distraction. And now I'm getting pissed. And I said, hey, a distraction? I said, how about this? We've won 5 Super Bowls with me everywhere. That wasn't a fucking distraction.
Oh, geez.
I said, I was with the A's. We went to 3 World Series. That wasn't a fucking distraction. I was with presidents. I said, how about this? My friend Pete Souza, he was in the war room with the president, the Joint Chiefs, when they brought down bin Laden. That's not a fucking distraction. This is just football. And he goes, well, you say you're invisible. You're not invisible. I'll be walking along the sideline, and here you are lying on your, you'll be down. And he get out of his seat, and he lays down. I started laughing. I said, come on, it's not that bad. He goes, no, it is that bad. He said, it's a distraction. You're there. And I said, Coach, that's in your head. And he goes, well, and at one point I was so pissed. I got up really fast and the chair tipped over. And I said, this is fucking bullshit. And he goes, and that's another thing. You don't have to use that language. And I said, how come anytime anybody hears something they don't want to hear, it's not about what they don't want to hear. It's about the language.
Oh my God.
So he says, well, next week you can shoot from an open door. And I went, ooh, God, thank you. And he said, and we'll have another discussion. So I walked away thinking maybe there's a little inroad. The next day, Jeep Christ, our quarterback coach, comes up to me. He goes, hey, heard you spoke with Coach yesterday, and I heard you were throwing chairs and dropping F-bombs. I said, what? I didn't throw any chairs. Yeah. He goes, I heard you threw a chair and I said, I got up fast and the chair tipped over. I said, dropping F-bombs. I said, how many people know this? He goes, see, everybody knows.
Yeah.
And I said, what? And he said, no, it's good.
Yeah, it's a badge of honor, man.
He said, Jimmy loves it when you're competing.
But Z, how many people, even with your experience, would have had the guts to stand up to a coach like that, or a PR person, or anybody in an organization? We're all about preserving our career. Yeah. I mean, you were really rolling the dice there. I mean, he could have said, you know what, you're out for good. Get it.
Oh, I know. Oh, no. Listen, and you know what? From day one, I mean, even going to Bill.
Yeah.
How many other coaches would have even listened to 10 minutes of that? Can you imagine doing that with Bill Parcells or Belichick or Lombardi or Hallis?
But I mean, somehow I think you would have done that. But hey, listen, man, I want to get into also just to wrap this up, because it's just been such a great conversation. We got to talk about your rock and roll, because your Total Excess book, which is another amazing book, right? It's a behind the scenes, really, of everything that you experienced in rock and roll. There's some great quotes. I read a quote that said, Zagaris enjoyed a Zelig-like presence on the 1970s rock scene, photographing everyone from the Grateful Dead to the Clash, Led Zeppelin to Blondie, often off stage with their guards down, right? And that that Total Excess is about being behind the scenes of rock and roll, but also living it. Like, you lived that lifestyle, right? So they were used to you being around, and you documented it.
Well, that's, you know what? I got into that because I wanted to be in the band, but I couldn't. I couldn't play. I mean, I wanted to be Eric Clapton. I wanted to be Peter Green, but I knew that was both a talent you're born with, and also, like, Eric told me, he said when he started out, he says, man, I played 8 to 10 hours a day. My fingers would bleed. I lived it. I thought, well, fuck, I can't do that. Yeah. But the next best thing is having a camera, because I knew the only people that were with the group day in and day out, the road manager, occasional girlfriends, and the dope dealer. So I'll be the cameraman, and I will document this like anything else. Yeah. But more important, the camera was merely the entree. The way the coke dealer's entree was his drugs. And I'll come in with the camera, and then I will be the Beatles. I'll be the Stones. And that's basically what I did, because once you're there, you're living the life. You're smoking the joint, you're doing the coke, you're dropping the acid, and that's all I wanted to do. I wanted to live the novel. I wanted my life to, and you know what? Doing what you do and what I do, in many respects, it's not unlike being a method actor. Stanislavski, you become what you shoot. You are what you shoot. Yeah, that's a great point. Then the photographs, they mirror that, and what we hold the mirror up to, that's what we can share with people. Yeah, that experience. Yeah, it's so true. So answer this last question. You photographed so many people, right? I mean, you talk about you didn't even mention the fact that you were there when Bobby Kennedy was shot. You were at the Ambassador Hotel. So you've been around people of greatness on every level, politics, sports, what have you, music. Is there anybody
you know, and then during your lifetime, right, of being a professional photographer, that you didn't have a chance to shoot, that you just wish that you had, or be around and document?
Elvis in before he went into the army. All those the Wertmeiler photos.
Yeah.
I would have loved to have experienced that.
Yeah.
And when I was at GW, I used to see James Brown sometimes for a week at a time in DC. And then I'd get on a bus and I'd go see him at the Royal Theater in Baltimore. And then I'd go to New York to see him there. To this day, there's no one I ever saw or experienced at any level that matched James Brown in 1964, 65, 66. This was pre-funk.
Yeah.
It was an experience like no other. And it was one of those things where you had to be there. It was like that.
Yeah. Do you have any Springsteen stories, by the way? I'm Springsteen.
You know, I shot Bruce at Winterland, I want to say 1978. And he, you know what? Yeah. That's when he was just.
Yeah, that was the Darkness tour where he was really break out.
And it was a great show, but I've got to be honest. Not a pimple on James Brown's ass. Nothing like the Rolling Stones. And it was different. And Bruce is incredible. But I think to every experience, we bring the experience we're coming to and then where we are. And compared to some of the things I had, witnessed, it was dynamite, but it wasn't quite on the level of even like the Sex Pistols. That last Sex Pistols show, I didn't even want to go. Rolling Stone had called me up, hey, these guys are coming, and I went, yeah, the Sex Pistols. Yeah, I know about them. Are you serious? Well, have you heard? I said, I got the album. They suck. And I had seen not even 5 minutes. CBS had done something when their tour started. Yeah. And it was like, I thought, Rolling Stone goes, look, we're paying you. We're hearing this might be there. They might be breaking up. Go to Winterland. So I went to Winterland for sound check. It was a cold, rainy January day. I'm waiting at the backstage door. The bus pulls up. They're getting off the bus. Malcolm McLaren, Johnny Rotten. Here comes Sid. Sid's fucked up. All of that being said, I could tell I had a feeling. I thought, wow. Now they're coming into the backstage door. Sid's got a fucking Nazi armband on his knee.
No way.
And Bill Graham is waiting. And Bill sees it. And you know Bill's story. Yeah. Bill had fled with his family, walked across Europe to escape the Nazis.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Family members in the Holocaust. Bill sees this, grabs Malcolm McLaren and goes, hey, that's not a fashion statement. He's got to take that off. and there was just like this electricity. Yeah. I ended up going home. I told Kristen, I said, hey, you've got to come with me tonight. She goes, the Sex Pistols? I said, just believe me. I think this is going to be something special. Yeah. We show up the out front of Winterland, and then when you walk in, they've got a very small area. It's the punk scene from LA had come up and it met the punk scene from San Francisco. When you went inside before the show started, there's no pit to shoot from. They came out from the moment they hit the stage. It was like a full-blown riot. It was pandemonium. People throwing bottles, shoes, pieces of clothes, people hacking up lumber, going,
oh, come on.
Off of, going, fuck you. And it was like a riot. And, I'm a big guy. And I was getting lifted up off and trying to shoot. And it was like, talk about a crossfire hurricane. Oh, my God. Bill Graham had one of those Minnesota Viking purple satin jackets. He grabbed Kristen from the stage. Yeah. He pulled her up because it was just a riot out front. Looked down at me like, how could you have her out there? I shot at the very end. I mean, Sid had cuts from the bottles that he had picked up in Dallas and slashed himself with. There were lungers hanging off his guitar.
Right.
And as they're walking off, Johnny Rotten grabbed a microphone and he goes, "Don't you all feel cheated?" And now we're backstage, and backstage is the same. It's like the punk scene and everything.
Yeah.
Sid comes out of an ante room with this girl named Ruby. She's got a dog collar. His nose is running. His eyes are watering. He's just shot up. There's Britt Eklund had come up with Sonny Jim, and she's got this like fur coat on. And Sid sees her, and he kind of like he reels and goes, throws up.
Yeah.
Gets part of her feet. She screams, and this guy in a black leather jacket that had come up with X turns to me and he goes, "Oh, that is so fucking punk." And I thought, this is one of the great nights ever, but you had to experience the whole thing.
Oh, absolutely. Well, the stuff you have seen and experienced, and as a gift to everyone, all of us in the business and outside the business, the gift of your photography and documenting for history. I mean, what's left, Z? What's left, on the dance card for you, buddy?
You know what? I think I'm just about done with sports because the landscape has changed so much.
Yeah.
I'm fortunate that I still have the access, but it's different. It's corporate.
Yep.
I mean, I know the league wasn't knocked out by that book, and it's and I think now everything that's cool, whether it's entertainment, whether it's sports, the things that we grew up in, it's now been co-opted by corporations.
It's true.
And the only access is paid for and controlled.
That's true. Like Hard Knocks and all the 30 for 30s and stuff. But it's
even they with the money.
Yeah.
A lot of it's a fight. No, you can't do that. Yeah, you can't do this.
For sure. Yeah.
And it's different. So we benefited. We were born at the right time, at the right place. And that all, imagine if you grew up in Kansas City. Nothing against Kansas City, but you wouldn't have had the Lakers, the Dodgers, all of those things in the era we grew up in. Imagine if you and I were starting out now, or Neil and Walter.
I get this all the time from young photographers, and I try to be as positive and encouraging as possible, but it's completely different. Absolutely, completely different. Unless this new content team that the teams have, across the board, every league has, they get access now. We don't get the access, but they get the access, and it's up to them to figure out how to have the chutzpah and the moxie to use that, for their benefit, to tell the story. Nobody's telling the story the way that you have through your incredible photography, my friend. Music, fashion, sports. I can't thank you enough for the body of work, first of all, but being an inspiration to myself and so many people, and for being a guest today on the Legends of Sport podcast. You are the best, Z. Thank you.
You know what? It's been an honor to be here, and everything you said, I gleaned all of that from all the people that were my influences. They influenced me the way I've influenced others. And that's, I think, our greatest gift is to give back, both in terms of our imagery and our stories.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you put this book out, your Total Excess book, that there were publishers that believed in that knew that story had to be told visually. And I can't wait for the next book.
I know. Well, you know what? Steve Fine, Brad Mangin.
Oh, for sure.
Ian, my designer. I mean, he killed. And for Chris Grenier and Cameron Publishers and Abrams, for them to spend the money. Paper, separation, all of that. It's, If you're Jim Brown, you don't gain any yards if you don't have anybody blocking for you. And these were all the people that contributed and helped me.
Yeah, no, those are all heavyweights for sure. Absolutely. Well, listen, man, I know I'll see you somewhere. I'm not doing any football, but I'll be up in the stands maybe, and I'll see you. And I'll
well, you know what?
you.
We've got to get together anyway. We've got a lot of other things to talk about.
No,
And
absolutely.
you still you've got, I want to see your behind the scenes. I want to see.
Yeah. Well, like you know, I have a league that I have to think about, you know, how that all would be perceived, but that'll come down the pike.
They should know. Yeah. I mean, with all the trust you have.
Yeah.
And you're not trying to be exploitive. You want to show the real picture.
Oh, absolutely. And I've had that opportunity with the book I did with Phil Jackson, and of course the Mamba Mentality book with Kobe. But listen, man, just keep leading the way. You know, just your energy and your passion are just so inspiring. And I'm so glad we got to chat today. So thanks, Z.
Hey, you know what? It's been great sharing the last 50 years, sharing the field with you.
Awesome.
And the stories. And you and I both know the best stories haven't even been told yet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but that, you know, this more than the tip of the iceberg in this incredible opus that you put out. So, but thanks, Z. You're the best, man. Thank you.
Andy, listen, anytime, man. Love hanging with you.
Great.
I'm sorry Suhu couldn't have been here too.
Yeah. Well, you know, you're part of a series now of legendary sports photographers, of which, you know, I had Neil, I had Walter, I had John, I had Tiba Jefferson, Lucy Nichols, a lot of people that you know, and we're continuing that series. I'm glad to be starting that series up again with you, because there's nobody better that I would want to, you know, lead the series off, the second part of it. So thank you.
You know what? I'm honored to be hanging in that locker room.
Yeah, there you go.
With all you guys.
Well, stay well, my friend, and I will see you down the road, I'm sure. Best of luck with the book, because the book speaks for itself, but so many people need to have this book. So we're going to be pushing it, and I wish you the best of success.
Thanks, Andy. Look forward to seeing you hopefully very soon.
Thanks, Z.
You take it easy.
You too.
Later, man.
Well, it was such a thrill to chat with my friend Michael Zagaris on this episode. He is truly a legend of photography, and I'm honored that he took the time to chat with me so we could bring this episode to all of you. I highly recommend his book, Field of Play, 60 Years of NFL Photography, to anyone, whether you're an NFL fan, a sports fan, a lover of photography, or you know someone who is. This book is an opus and testament to the greatness of one of the giants in the field of sports photography. Z's book, Total Excess, is great too. It's a compelling look behind the curtain of his many years in and around rock and roll. Many thanks to my terrific producer, Eugenia Chow, and our editors, Megan and Sean, as well as our social media manager, Michael. Remember, everyone, you can find us on the iHeart app and online, as well as Apple and Spotify and your favorite podcast platform. Keep following us on Instagram at Legends of Sport, our Twitter, Legends_of_Sport, our website, legendsofsport.net, and as always, our YouTube and TikTok channels, Legends of Sport. My photography can be found on Instagram and Twitter at ADB Photo Inc. Thanks, everyone, for continuing to support the Legends of Sport podcast. Remember to rate and review and tell all your friends. We'll be back next week with another great episode, so stay tuned for that. Until then, stay safe and stay well.